In other stories we're tracking for you, the Children's Amendment Bill seeks to find a comprehensive legal solution to the crisis in South Africa's foster care system. Now, according to the Children's Act, foster care grants expire after 2 years unless extended by an order of a children's court. Meanwhile, the lapsed court orders have caused thousands of orphans to lose their grants. The Children's Amendment Bill will also deal with the access of unmarried fathers to their children, and it seeks to grant them parenting responsibilities. There are also amendments to adoption and reform of the early childhood development sector. Public hearings are currently underway, and people are being urged to take part in those hearings. But joining us now to unpack some of the amendments is Advocate Gillian Benson. Advocate, it's great to have you with us on the show this morning on what is an incredibly important issue in our country. I want to begin with just some context to the Children's Amendment Bill. If you can give us a sense of this crisis that we talk about in South Africa's foster care system, outline that for us.
Well, as you've stated, presently the grants have been affected. They are expiring. This has been impacted further by the COVID regulations because access to court has also been limited. Now, the bill that is proposed, B18/2020, seeks to introduce various measures to reform the regulatory framework for issues such as foster care, as well as a fund for early childhood development, because presently the issues span further than that, because we have over 1 million children in the age range of 3 to 5 years that don't have access to early childhood development. How that's going to work in practice when we already have financial and economic issues affecting children in that age range is yet to be seen. And the efficacy of those issues, will be something to observe when and if the bill is now enacted. So the bill also goes further, though, than just to deal with basic issues of foster care. So it has expanded the jurisdiction of the children's courts. They will be able to deal with issues of guardianship and adoption. So it will give them greater powers. Unfortunately, again, how that's going to work in practice is going to be interesting because the courts are already inundated with matters, and access to our judicial systems are not only costly, but also, as I've stated, inundated with current matters. Yeah. The bill further will assist foster children in that presently, if a child is placed in care, they can end up in the system indefinitely. The bill will reduce the period that they are placed in temporary care for no more than 72 hours, and then government will be duty-bound to ensure that the children are placed in a permanent place of safety that is conducive to them with the assistance of social workers. Again, this is what is being proposed in theory. How it's going to work practically will be a matter for us to watch. The bill further deals with issues of surrogacy, but most importantly, and what has people very excited, is that it extends the rights of unmarried fathers. Presently, unmarried fathers, only if they are residing with the mother at the time of the birth of the child in a life partnership, do they automatically acquire full parental rights and responsibilities with the mother. The bill extends that now to fathers who resided with the biological mother at time of conception or any time prior to the birth. So it increases the period for those full rights and responsibilities to be given to the father.
I mean, in terms of public hearings that are currently underway, you've spoken extensively about the fact that many of these proposals are just that. They are proposals, and how they will work practically is still under question. Given that, it's so incredibly important that the public does take part in these hearings, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's critical. And there are some organizations that are involving themselves in these public hearing participations. But the public needs to get involved, and more so those people that are involved currently in, baby shelters or foster care, because it is going to have an impact on them.
And because they know more intricately what's happening on the ground, so to speak.
Correct, and they're aware of the current difficulties in the system. Children in this country that are, especially in the impoverished areas, will be affected by the bill once it's enacted. And one would hope that it's going to improve the situation, but as I've stated, we already have a judicial system that is overburdened, social workers who are also overburdened and hard to find, especially in pro bono cases. It's all fair and well when litigants are trying to adopt or apply for guardianship of the wealthier class because they can afford lawyers. But, for instance, an assessment, a private assessment, when there's a dispute on custody in a divorce matter, can cost hundreds and thousands of rands. And a lot of the private psychologists will ask for a deposit of up to 150,000 rand. Now, when you're sitting in the lower structures of the economy, you cannot simply afford that. So we do have the Office of the Family Advocate that plays a very important role and will continue to do so if the bill is enacted, specifically in relation to the rights of unmarried fathers. Yeah. But again, you wait many, many months for an appointment with the Family Advocate's office because they too are inundated. So unless we start fixing the judicial structures and increasing their competency, it doesn't matter how many new laws you make because we're failing the existing ones.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of this issue around unmarried fathers and parental responsibilities, you talk about our courts being inundated with issues like this, and it spends often years before the court. The other issue is, of course, once it is enacted, to get that information out there, that unmarried fathers do have these parental responsibilities.
I think that's the one part of the bill that is already spread everywhere. I've had numerous phone calls from clients or prospective clients saying, how do I do this? And I've stated, you have to advise them, slow down, it's not in yet, but it will be. So public awareness, insofar as that is concerned, does seem to be spreading. I think, unmarried fathers have been fighting these battles for a long time. There was recently that gentleman who went on a hunger strike who, had no contact. But, as I've stated, it doesn't matter how many new laws you implement. We have clients who were married, who have full parental rights and responsibilities over their children, where the mothers or the fathers refuse contact for months on end. And again, that involves a costly litigious exercise to approach the courts for an order to see the children. Yeah,
and of course, lockdown, the past year and a bit of lockdown has made that even more difficult.
It did. The lockdown regulations, specifically at the beginning, it was something that I personally encountered. We needed permits to transfer children between parents. And often parents were obstructive and the magistrates were confused as to whether they were able to issue those permits. So lockdown definitely did create quite an opportunistic arena for parents who refuse contact to take advantage of the regulations. And of course, with the courts being restricted, that further prohibited access to the courts. Many matters were postponed or removed, and some parents have been waiting many months to see their children still.
And of course, as usual, children caught in the middle of issues that don't concern them at all. This bill, in terms of specifically the parental rights of unmarried fathers, it goes some way in addressing some of the loopholes that vulnerable children face. But where do you reckon the gaps still are?
Well, the gaps are still going to be in, for instance, they're proposing this early childhood development program. Who's going to fund that? Where are we going to get the resources? Who's going to monitor how those resources are expended? in the rural areas, how do they propose that those funds are going to be spent? We're sitting with situations where we can't eradicate pit latrines and toilets, and now we want to start early childhood development programs. So the reason that all of these proposals in the new bill are being made is that they're trying to bring it in line with the United Nations conventions. So it's a great idea because they see in the wealthier countries that the proposals in accordance with the United Nations Convention actually increases later economic wealth for individuals. So that early learning stage is critical.
Yeah.
So these are things that the public are not aware about in relation to the new bill. But it is going to be something that somebody's going to have to watch if and when it's implemented, to ensure that it is run smoothly and effectively.
Yeah,
and that it's implemented at all.
Yeah, and that it reaps the benefits that it's intended to do. Very, very importantly, before we let you go, how do I get involved with these public discussions?
Well, this is the difficulty. Often they're not, I watch the parliamentary site to see what's happening, but with the current status with COVID and the lockdown, it's very difficult even for legal practitioners to be kept up to date as to when these public hearings take place. So there definitely needs to be a forum, and the media should certainly assist in finding out and liaising with government or the Parliament as to when these discussions take place and when they are held, because they are not widely marketed or advertised.
Yeah, it's one thing to call for public participation, a whole thing entirely when the public can't find out exactly how to do so.
Absolutely.
Advocate Gillian Benson, thanks so much for your time this morning on this incredibly important issue. Public hearings underway for the Children's Amendment Bill. It goes a long way to address a number of issues. Perhaps the one thing that does stand out is previously fathers who did not have automatic access to their children will then have full parental responsibilities for their children. But this is a big developing story that we're tracking for you right here on the channel. In fact, when those public hearings get underway is an important thing that we'll be checking on for you, and we'll certainly come back to you with those details.